You are now familiar with most of the salient details. Police officer cleared of murdering a man he shot in the head in South London 2 years ago. The officer, Martyn Blake, shot Chris Kaba, who was unarmed, during a police vehicle stop in Streatham back in September 2022. Speaking after the verdict at the Old Bailey, Mr Kaba's family said it was painful proof that our lives are not valued by the system. Well, I don't think Mr Kaba's victims across his long life as a career violent criminal would quite share that analysis. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said no police officer is above the law, but we've been clear the system holding police to account is broken. The Met officer said, who was suspended throughout the process, would be immediately reinstated. Thank goodness for that. Now, in an ideal world, we'd rather not see anybody killed, because we'd rather not see anybody either committing violent crimes, being linked to violent crimes, and be willing to do what Mr Kaba was clearly willing to do with a vehicle, a tonne's worth of car, ramming in and out around the presence of police, members of the public. I mean, this was a horrendous weapon of choice for Kaba, and he paid the ultimate price. The car had a marker on it, 2 incidents that had alerted the police to follow the car, and when you see that many blue lights around you, you tend to stop. And if you don't stop and you're in a car that has been associated with gun crime and you're doing your very best to escape in a very violent, frantic moment, this is the upshot. This was never, ever a case of an officer murdering anyone. This was an officer doing his job. And whether you look at plain instinct or the demonstrable choreography of what was happening at the time, I think it would be clear to anyone with a brain cell that what the officer did there was what any officer would do in that situation. In fact, we now know that other firearms officer, one of Mr Blake's fellow colleagues at the time, told the court that he would have taken a shot if Mr Blake hadn't. Another said he was fractions of a second away from doing the same. There was general agreement, split-second thinking, and as it turned out, it was Mr Blake that fired the fatal shot. He then goes through 2 years of absolute hell, charged with murder, bad enough, then publicly named, not usual in these kind of cases. That would have put his family's life in a very difficult situation. He would have been in limbo for that entire time. And the mere idea, and I'm hearing, look, do you know what? Part of me gets it. Family members, even if your son is a wrong-un, I understand why you would clearly have a robust response. I think most of us might, contradictory as it might be, might have the same, I didn't need to shoot him. I kind of see why they would say it, but we don't make rules, and we certainly don't make conclusive judgments based on the emotions of the family in this case. That's not kind of how it works. The law doesn't work in that way. The law divorces sentiment. It allows for objective and clear views and analysis on situations such as this. So if you, bearing in mind what the copper went through here, I mean, is policing now just an impossible task? And I remember speaking off the record a year or more ago to some firearms officers who were privy to some of the information that has now come out. But certainly there was a big rethink on, after naming Martyn Blake as well, there was a big rethink on whether, do I even want to do this job? Do I want to be walking around with a gun when we have a situation where I could be analysed and put in the court of public opinion before any kind of court case is taken? Do we really want to be in that job? So I'm bound to ask that question. I'd like to engage your views as well, particularly if you're a serving officer or a former officer. Because I look at this and I do a bit of work with the police, and I said to Julia, I've gone to the Police Bravery Awards almost every year for about the last 7 or 8 years. I also host the Bravery Awards in Cleveland as well, which I'll be doing again at the beginning of next year. When you see some of the stories, I mean, these are the most heartbreaking, challenging, upsetting stories to see of the positions police officers have put themselves in for the greater good in order to so often save the perpetrator as well as anything else, put their own life on the line at risk, involving firearms, involving the use of being rammed by a car, involving stabbings, involving all manner of things. At one end, it could be somebody attempting suicide and officers have put their life at risk to save that person. It could, on another occasion, be talking somebody out of using a firearm or a knife. I mean, the list goes on. The list goes on. It's one of the most emotional evenings you could attend. Just to give you an idea of what happens in the life of the everyday copper. And these events don't come around all the time, and something as big as this may only come around once, if at all, in a police officer's career. But the ripple effect of this is absolutely massive. Do you back the police, by the way? Can I ask that question? And when we are with this phrase two-tier policing, which is doing the rounds at the moment, which is mostly and largely kind of a misplaced analysis of what is going on. I think what we saw here was justice. Pure and simple justice. But I totally understand why many people, particularly serving or former officers, would see policing as now an impossible task, analysed in every microsecond of what you do. Part of the gig, part of the deal of being a police officer, of course, is to make split-second decisions, whether that is something such as this or many other scenarios you might find yourself in. That is then analysed by people who sit in a room and watch things in slow motion over and over and over and over again, and then try to draw a conclusion and second-guess what the officer was doing in a split second. You can begin to see how difficult and tricky this is. Is policing now impossible in this country?